Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's another video in my 2024 off-season prediction series. We're going to finish fixing the Indianapolis Colts. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment in the comment section below. All these things help out with the algorithms and, get some good football discourse going in there. Argue me, agree with me, doesn't matter, but don't expect me to back down. Okay, I'm not catching feelings. I'm not, getting defensive. I'm just defending my point that I'm making here in this video because I truly believe it. And one thing I truly believe about the Indianapolis Colts is that they definitely overachieved a little bit this year. And I think that has a lot to do with Shane Steichen, the head coach, who I think, had they made the playoffs, I think for sure should have been nominated for Coach of the Year, at least considered for it. Played it without his rookie quarterback, who they invested highly in. Did it with some really behind-the-scenes issues with some of their better players like Jonathan Taylor. Had to revitalize an offensive line that had struggled the year before, and had to bring confidence back to a roster that sort of just kind of lost it in the previous season under the previous regime, a really poorly coached regime back then. But I really like what they have in terms of core athletes. They have to bring back certain key contributors on their team, and they have to improve in certain aspects of the offense and the defense. If they can improve certain areas, I think, rising tides raises all ships type of a deal for them, because they do have a lot of raw talent. I think further meshing the young talent with the established talent will take them a long way. I like that they're going to have some flexibility in free agency potentially to be able to make maybe a splash signing if they want to, or to bring in maybe some under the radar talents who have underachieved in other cities, or just haven't been given opportunities because they've sort of fallen down the depth charts a little bit just because the other talent there has been so immensely high, or they just maybe fit a scheme a little bit better, but they're still good players. I think they have a real opportunity there to improve themselves, to make things better for their rookie quarterback, and to help improve aspects of their defense that really has been up and down the last couple of years. They're really looking for an identity on that defense, especially now that they don't have Darius Leonard anymore. What's the defensive identity? I think they have to go back in this offseason and truly find that, whether they do it in free agency or the draft or a combination of both. I think that should be a real focus for them. But let's get started and talk about their head coach. So we have head coach Shane Steichen going into his second year, and he had a very successful first year, I must say. He took over a team that looked hopeless under Frank Reich. He got a brand new quarterback who ended up getting injured, which made things even more difficult for him, and he was still able to put a pretty good product on the field. They have a lot of roster issues sort of up in the air, but he really proved his worth this year by turning around this team. The Colts and the Texans are great stories for turnarounds this year with their new head coaches and their new quarterbacks. We'll see what happens with Anthony Richardson moving forward. We'll see what this offense really looks like. Hopefully this upcoming next season with Richardson 100% healthy, maybe they'll add a couple of pieces out there. Hopefully they don't lose anyone for him. But he also proved his worth by how poor and uninventive the Philadelphia Eagles offense looked this year, especially in that second half of the season, where they ended up firing everyone. Now they're looking for brand new coordinators for the second straight year in a row because Shane Steichen was so valuable to Nick Sirianni's staff. And in his first year, we'll look at some of the rankings that they had here. 10th in points, which is unbelievable. They didn't do very well on third down and in the red zone, though. That's where they really seemed to struggle. Their passing offense was relatively inconsistent because, you had Anthony Richardson, but then you had Gardner Minshew. I think they had a third quarterback play during the year. I could be wrong. But there was just a lot of inconsistency there, but they still had a pretty good running game out there. Jonathan Taylor, not quite what he was that dominant season that he had, but he's still, I think, a top tier back. I think when you put him and Anthony Richardson together for a 17-game season, if Richardson's even capable of playing like that, I think you're possibly looking at that Cam Newton, Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams type of combination that we saw do so well in Carolina. But still upper half of the league in yards, upper half of the league in touchdowns, almost top 10. They didn't turn the ball over all that much, which we'll see what happens with Anthony Richardson. He didn't really get a lot of opportunities this year because of the injuries. So we'll see if that rookie quarterback type thing, because technically next year will also sort of be part of his rookie season until he gets those I would say until you get like a dozen to 16 games in. I think it's safe to say that you're still a rookie quarterback, at least with the rookie mentality, where game speed and everything. Sacks allowed 16th, middle of the league. We'll see how that changes with Richardson in the backfield. You would expect them maybe to not give up as much sacks, but then there's also the using the athleticism to maybe extend plays too long, leading to sacks that shouldn't necessarily happen. So it may even out, but the offensive line in Indianapolis definitely improved upon what they did last year, and they seem to go back to being one of the better offensive lines in the league, which is what they were sort of projected to be outside of last year. Then you move over to the defensive side where they had Gus Bradley. The defense didn't play great. They got a lot. They did well with sacks. They did well on third down. They were middle of the pack in pass attempts against them. Pass yards allowed in the middle. So their pass defense, based upon how many times they were thrown against, actually kind of did well. They did get run all over. And we'll get into how they can possibly maybe improve that. They have two good defensive tackles, DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. But how do you execute a rush defense everywhere else on the field? I think that'll be a task ahead of them. Total yards allowed, they were 24th, total touchdowns allowed. So they were in the bottom half of those categories, bottom 10 in total yards. And, it'll be interesting to see how the rush defense comes to fruition, because teams would want to shorten games against the Colts, get up, because their offense, even with Gardner Minshew, wasn't necessarily designed to be that comeback from behind team. And I think teams took advantage of that, but if they can build on the sacks, they did the sacks without really having a truly great edge rusher. Quiddy Pay, and they have guys like that, but they could still stand to get a true number one edge for their roster. And I think that that's something not a lot of people talk about. And I think they can improve in the cornerback room as well. I would expect a lot of their focus in the draft to go towards defense. I could see, depending on what happens with Michael Pittman, be a wide receiver, but we'll get to that shortly. But overall, it was a successful year. They just got to improve in some key categories here. And that'll take them over the top, because they won a lot of games with some of these glaring issues. So maybe they can take that next step with a couple quick roster shufflings. And they are coming into the season with some significant cap room, almost $64 million in salary cap. They do have some guys they do need to bring back, however. They have some significant signings they need to make. And we'll start with the re-signings that I have them doing. It's Kenny Moore, 3 years, $24 million with a $23 million bonus, 2 void years. You're going to see a lot of void years pop up now that I know how to kind of manipulate them a little bit to help with the salary cap hits. Then you have Grover Stewart, 3 years, $30 million with a $15 million bonus, 1 year voided to help spread out the cap. And then Julian Blackmon, 3 years, $22.5 million with a $12.5 million bonus, 2 void years in that contract as well. And you're still able to create some cap space here by adjusting some deals. You could make $20 million by cutting DeForest Buckner, but why would you? He's one of the better defensive tackles, even if he hasn't been performing necessarily as that the last season. But you can extend him 3 years, $60 million with a $30 million bonus, throw 2 void years on there, and you've lessened his cap hit for this season, and you've also extended him for the next couple of years. And then there's Michael Pittman Jr., who I franchise tagged at about $22 million for the year. This gives you some levity to then give him an extension, because he's somebody that you want to keep around. I think that he's a lower end wide receiver one, but if you can add to this wide receiver room in a significant way, perhaps, then you would end up having probably one of the better wide receiver rooms in the league if Pittman all of a sudden becomes your number 2. It's sort of, he's in that weird spot where he's your number 1. The likelihood is you have a bottom half. You're outside the top 10, at least in terms of wide receiver rooms. But if he's your wide receiver 2, you're likely somewhere in the top 10. if not top 5. And then you're going to cut Mo Alley Cox for $5.9 million. That's an easy cap casualty to have. So you're really bringing back a lot of your core players, especially there on the defense. And you're keeping the number 1 receiver there for your quarterback who's going to be coming back from injury. It was a really easy in-house move, and you're not using a lot of cap space. The void years are something that I'm not shocked at all that they use, because you can spread out that bonus over 5 years, for example, with DeForest Buckner, rather than just the 3 years, and that's a significant difference. It's $4 million less on the cap per year doing it that way. So even with all that, you got $28.2 million in spending cap, give or take a couple bucks. You can tag Pittman and then extend him shortly after, and you can open up probably anywhere from about $10 million in extra cap space doing it that way, depending on how you structure his deal. So there's ways to increase this number, but you look at the team needs they have, and I do think that wide receiver and tight end are things that they should look into. In terms of adding a weapon there, I wouldn't necessarily think that they're hard pressed to add at both positions, but I do think you can stand to add one of the two. Jelani Woods I think is a good tight end, but you could probably add another weapon in that sense, especially for a guy like Richardson, who you might be better served performing a lot of the offense from inside the hashes, sort of like what they did with Lamar Jackson for a lot of the time. Or you can add another wide receiver, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman. That's good 3, but maybe get another like a bigger wide receiver to sort of complement maybe Alex Pierce and Michael Pittman, and then you have Josh Downs sort of be your little slot guy that you have out there. I also like the idea of them adding an interior offensive lineman at the other guard position, getting a number 1 edge and getting another corner. I do see the defensive needs being the most significant because they did rank 28th in points, like I said, as opposed to actually being able to score quite a number of points throughout the season. So I'm looking at the free agency, and because they have the room to do this, I'm signing 2 pretty good players. I'm looking at wide receiver Tyler Boyd, 3 years, $20 million with a $13 million bonus. It's basically the Jacoby Myers contract. I see Tyler Boyd sort of coming into this free agency with perhaps the same market. And then defensive end Chase Young, 4 years, $60 million with a $10 million bonus. I don't think he's going to command number 1 money. He's never really performed that way in the injuries and whatnot, but I think you can get some guy who can come in and, you can unleash this guy and maybe you get the best years out of him, especially with really good compliments on the interior. I think you can maybe make some big moves here. Maybe the change in the system to Gus Bradley style will assist in his further development, putting some healthy time behind him. Maybe the experience that he had in San Francisco working with Steve Wilkes and Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and all those great talents that they have in San Francisco right now is going to make a difference for him and maybe change his mindset a bit. Maybe he learned something or a thing or two. And I think you can structure these deals where you can not really knocking a whole lot off your cap in the first year also. Again, void years, backloading, all that good stuff. So with those 2 signings, I got it to about $9 million. So you're probably looking at a situation where you might want to figure out a way after you tag Michael Pittman to give him an extension to lower the cap hit on that. To free up, you want to get maybe around $13 million in remaining cap to be able to make the signings that you want in free agency, but still positioned in a pretty good spot. But my draft strategy is real simple. I'm looking at the pass defense here in the first round, and that being depending on what I do in free agency, of course. I'm a big believer in free agency, getting your needs and then drafting for value, especially in the early rounds. So in this scenario, I got Chase Young, so I'm going to be looking at a defensive back here. I'm looking at a guy like Cooper DeJean. I'm looking at Kool-Aid McKinstry. I'm looking at Nate Wiggins. I want to grab one of those guys to help out the pass defense. I want a guy who can play cornerback probably more than anything else. I wouldn't be surprised if this team maybe trades back a bit if the corners especially start to drop, and I think that will open them up. If they go that route, if they end up needing a defensive end type, then maybe they can grab somebody there and sort of stay where they're at. On day 2, I'm looking at offensive weapons. I want to fill out my weaponry here. I want to look at, depending on what you do in free agency, I want to look at receivers. I want to look at tight ends. And I even want to look at guys to help out with the depth of the running back position. Because when you have Anthony Richardson, you're going to be running the ball a lot, really using his skill set to your advantage, at least early here in his career. So you don't want to just run Jonathan Taylor into the ground. You want to have, different types of backs. You want to have maybe just a straight up power back. You want to have just a little gadget back that you can have out there, just a little small, speedy guy. I think you can do that. At least add one of those types in the second day of the draft. And then on day 3, I want to fill out the depth of the front 7 of the defense. Look at some guys for the defensive line, the linebackers, get some good rotations going in there to keep some fresh legs. I want to look at some of the offensive line depth, get a good 7th, 8th offensive lineman if you can help it. And then just fill out the defensive back room as well. Try to find some diamond in the rough day 3 option that can come in and be a contributor in one facet of the defense. If it's an early down defensive back to help be an 8th man in the box for the run game, do that. Or if it's a straight up, deep third safety, or some ball hawking playmaker who maybe has some technical issues, you maybe want to bring him in for the upside, like a raw talent. But that's sort of what my focus would want to be on day 3. And maybe, especially with the defensive line, the linebackers, focus on getting guys who might be early down players to keep fresh legs for those third downs and those passing situations, which simultaneously will improve your run defense and your pass defense, because you're keeping your pass rushers fresh while also having run stuffing specialists for those early downs, because you're going to see the running. You don't really know if Derrick Henry's going to be there anymore, but you got Travis Etienne there. You got Singletary, who might be coming back, Dameon Pierce. Houston's in the market for perhaps getting a pretty big running back in the offseason to really round off their offense. So you want to be able to be prepared to combat that. And there it is. My predictions for the 2024 Indianapolis Colts offseason. What do you think of Chase Young? What do you think of Tyler Boyd? What do you think of my draft strategy in particular? What do you think of the extensions that I gave to certain players? Not really buying into having to have too many cash casualties. Keeping the big players and hoping they can get back on track, rather than cutting your losses and hoping for the best with somebody that might be a little bit less talented. Leave it in the comment section below, and I will see you guys with the next video next time. And you can watch all the other stuff on either side of my head. There they are. They popped up. They're there. Either side. Playlist, recommended video, playlist, recommended video, or is it recommended video, playlist? Playlist or recommended video? Whatever. Bye.